Welcome to Story Time with Chris James. I will hopefully pick up where I left off last time. Unfortunately, I lost the little note that said where I left off. So, Belle did a weird little dance move and managed to get her shoes on. The laces flapped around as she ran. They immediately began to steam. The three girls took off at a dead run for the campers on the far side of the tailings. Pam struggled to get her coat on as they went. The snow covered ground looked too white in the moonlight. The ground seemed to glow. It was so bright. This only made the shadows that much darker. The three were having a hard time running because the snow was soft in some places but frozen hard in others. Sometime a shoe would slide over the ice, and other times it would crash through to the frozen ground. This was taking a toll on their flight. As they ran, Pam could just make out things moving in the shadows. "We're not going to make it to the campers. Head for the mine," as she gasped as she ran. Belle just nodded, unable to talk and run. The cold air was burning her throat. Sara chose that moment to simply collapse, as she'd outrun her endurance. Without missing a beat, Pam grabbed one arm and Belle grabbed the other. Between them, they dragged Sara along behind them. Sara watched as the world, or at least the part she could see, was moving away between her toes. This would have been a lot more enjoyable experience if not for the part of her body making contact and therefore being pummeled by the ground. Snow was getting in at the waistline of her jeans, which actually helped freeze the part of her that would otherwise be getting quite sore. She saw the hordes of zombies shuffling along in their wake. The dead moved so slow, she wondered why they took off running in the first place. Once she had caught her breath and could speak, she yelled to her friends. Well, her friend and the witch, who she didn't quite trust yet. True, she had slept with her twice without being consumed, but still you never know for sure when dealing with witches. "Hey guys, those creatures, they're really slow. Why is it we're running?" Pam looked back over her shoulder. Now then she looked down at her minion. "We're running because there are about 1,000 of those things, and they're trying to encircle us." Then run faster." As Sara suddenly found the view between her toes less enjoyable. The entrance to the mine came into view. It was a black hole on a nearly black wall of rock. Pam and Belle dragged Sara through the opening. Once inside, Belle let go of Sara and turned back to the opening. She held her hands up in the air, wiggling her fingers majestically. Then she pointed her hand at the mine entrance. What looked like spider webs shot from her fingertips. The webs formed a sticky mess across the mine entrance. It was anything but artistic. Where a spider wi- where a spider will leave a silk structure that when seen in close is a thing of beauty, the web Belle formed looked like a road map of Dallas after being crunched up and then partially laid flat. The first zombie stumbled into the web. It came to a halt, held in place by the gluey threads. As the zombie tried to pull loose, a second, then third zombie piled in next to and partially on top of him, or her. It was hard to tell in the dark. Soon the mine entrance was a solid mass of wreathing, sticky zombies. Belle was sweating and shaking from the run and the immense energy needed to form the web. "I'm done for today," and she collapsed to the floor of the mine. Pam got Sara to her feet. "Give me a hand. We should move farther down the tunnel." Pam grabbed Belle and pulled. She got the witch into a sitting position. Sara grabbed a handful of black dress and pulled. A bell went from sitting to slumped over Pam's shoulder. Oh man, this looks so much easier on TV. Pam began to stagger down the tunnel. As Sara kept an eye on the wall of stuck zombies as she followed her friend and nearly friend into the darkness beyond. Pam managed to pull the flashlight from her pocket. She tried to direct the beam down the tunnel, but nearly dropped Belle in the process. Sara saw the commotion and got the light from Pam. She tried to aim the light beam around the two in front of her. You'll have to go first so I can see where I'm going. Pam was struggling to take each step. Belle wasn't all that big, but Pam was worn out after the run. Sara looked at the darkness on the other side of Pam. You mean, like, in front of you? As in, the one most likely to die first? She thought she could hear a monster just lurking at the end of the light beam. It's either that or you carry Belle and I go first. Pam was leaning against the tunnel wall. Sara looked at Belle. She looked at the long, dark tunnel. She weighed her options. Is there a choice where I get to stay in the back and not carry the witch? Let me think. No, one or the other. Pam was feeling a bit better now that she'd lost all feeling in her shoulder. Sara did want to help. Her wish to not die outweighed her wish to help her friend or her friends. This was not helping her decision making at all. Okay, I'll carry the witch. No, the light. But if I get killed and eaten by monsters, I'm coming back and haunting you forever. She knew Pam could see and talk to ghosts. Pam staggered on. She envisioned herself as the heroine in some movie. Then it came to her, she wasn't in a movie, and this just might have been a very bad ending. Belle twitched. She found the shoulder she was hanging over was digging into her stomach. Uh, I think I can walk from here. Pam was going to gently set her friend down, but when she stopped, the winch simply fell to the ground. Ouch. Well, thanks for carrying me. Belle felt odd having to rely on others for help. Pam listened for the sound of pursuit. That web should hold for about 10 minutes or so. Belle managed to get to her feet. Well, it's been 15 minutes since we came in here. Pam tried to listen some more. Oh, well, we'd best get going then. Belle stood up and then sank back down. Pam got one arm under her. Let's keep going. Maybe we can find another way out. We're walking under a mountain. We'd have to walk to the next county to get out. Sara was looking back the way they'd come. I think I hear zombie movement. Let's just keep going and see. Pam began walking, supporting Belle with one arm. They came to the junction with the other tunnel, the one with the sign that said dead end. Pam had been leading, so now she had her flashlight back. Let's look down here again. Maybe we'll see some way out. Pam made her way into the partially falling down tunnel. Belle was mostly on her own feet by now and followed. Sara hung back until she realized she was now all alone in the dark. Hey, wait up! She hurried after the others. They walked as far as they could. That room full of statues is just ahead. There might be a way out from there. Pam was going on the assumption that those statues had been hauled in there somehow. Pam's mind went to work dredging up every horror movie she'd ever seen. The hole Belle had found was just ahead. It looked more and more like the mouth of some horrible creature. The sound of the zombies coming up behind them got Pam into the hole. She tried to keep the flashlight in one hand while using the other to pull herself along through the opening. She got her head and then her shoulders up and through the hole, and then she found she couldn't move. I think I'm stuck. Sarah was right behind her. What was that? Something about a duck? Belle could now hear footsteps, or rather foot drags, coming closer behind them. Would you hurry up? I think we've got company. She tried to push Sarah along. Sarah felt Pam's legs. Are you going to move, or are you stuck? Pam's head was on the other side of the rock wall. The voices from her friends were nearly impossible to hear. She wiggled around until one hand found something to grab. It felt like a smooth stone pillar. She pulled. Her body moved. She pulled harder, and then she was sliding through the opening. Sarah came through without touching any of the sides. Oh, the advantages of her small size. Belle was now in a fix. She wasn't all that much bigger than Pam, but that hole was really small. Something made a growling sound right behind her. Belle dove head first into the hole. She felt icy fingers grasping her ankles. Pam saw Belle's head come through. She grabbed the witch by the shoulders and pulled. With Sarah's help, they got the third member of their party through. Belle thought she heard the sound of a cork leaving a bottle. As Belle cleared the opening, Pam shoved a wooden pole she'd found into the hole. She quickly grabbed a few rocks and shoved them in as well, wedging the pole in place. She hammered the rocks with other rocks until they were tight. There, that ought to keep them on the other side. Uh-oh, Sarah said from behind. Pam didn't like that sound. Any time somebody said, uh-oh, it never meant anything nice. It usually means something terrible is either happening or about to happen. Pam turned around. There were hundreds of undead looking creatures all around them. Some were kind enough to be holding torches, so Pam could see just how many of these nasty zombie creatures she had to face. She wished she couldn't see some of them. Their bodies were in very bad shape. Pam could see ribs sticking out of chests. Some were missing parts. Most were dressed as if extras in an old Egyptian movie. Others had what looked like towels wrapped around their waists, so they would look like they were extras in some very low budget Egyptian movie. At least she wasn't going to face them alone. Belle, you have any more spells you can use to save us? I'm spent. I can do as many potions as I have like in a day, but I can only do so many spells. It's kind of hard on the system, if you know what I mean. Belle patted her cloak just in case she had forgotten some potion she could throw. I don't even have my gold fungus. Sarah was holding her hands over her face just in case having her eyes closed wasn't enough. Are we going to die? She could barely speak. Belle tried to put on a brave face. I'll take that one, and you take the rest. She put up her fists in what she hoped was a defensive maneuver. Oh, okay. You take on two, and I get the other 300. Pam was spending too much time with Mr. Armstrong. The zombies all just stood there. Pam looked for an opening so maybe they could run and maybe escape. It was crazy, but there wasn't anything else she could think of. Step aside! The voice sounded like someone in charge. He yelled a bit more, and soon the zombies had cleared a path. Pam looked up and saw a short, pudgy man walking towards them. He had the air of someone a lot bigger. I see my plan has worked out the way I planned it. He got a look on his face when he realized he was being a bit redundant. He was dressed like an Egyptian high priest. At first, Pam thought they were saved, but then she saw this guy was in charge of these undead creatures. He smirked at the three misadventurers. Excellent. These should work out much better than those college kids. He rubbed his hands together. Work out as in we divvy up the treasure and go our separate ways? Sarah still had her eyes shut. The man got a look on his face. What treasure are you talking about? He looked around in case he had missed something. Belle pulled her hand from her cloak and threw some dust in the air. Pam thought it was some magic dust that would allow them to walk out of here by freezing the zombies in place. But then she saw they were still moving. Was that some magic spell to get us out of here? No, it was just something to mask that awful smell. These dead things stink. Pam noticed the air was a bit less rank now. The weird guy was now looking at Pam, from her boots to her messy hair. Yes, this one will do nicely. He did some more of that hand rubbing. Pam didn't like the sound of this. Do nicely as in what? Why, marry the king, of course. He smiled to himself. Whoa, wait a minute. No one is marrying anybody, especially not without asking my dad first. Pam tried her best tough guy pose. She didn't pull it off. Sarah still had her eyes closed and her hands over them. As she was getting a distinct impression there was something going on around her, but she was not following the conversation. Belle tried to assert her authority, which she found mostly lacking. And just who do you think you are? When the guy turned to her, she quickly moved behind Pam. He looked at the witch. Are you one of the handmaidens of Osiris? Just a note. See, in ancient Egypt, Osiris, lord of the undead, was depicted as having greenish black skin. So Belle kind of looked like one of his. I'm nobody's maid, she said in a loud voice. And then quieter, she said, I'm just here for the gold fungus. Belle tried to look unhandmaiden like. My name is Not Good, I Be Bad, if it's any of your business. He looked at the zombies around them. Bring them. We must prepare for the wedding. The weird guy turned and started walking away. The zombies all grabbed an arm or a leg, or sometimes both, and began dragging Pam and her companions in his wake. The three tried to resist. Pam was yelling, I can't get married. My mom won't approve. Belle was trying to cast a spell, but nothing was working. Sarah tried her best berserk battle moves, as in when she took on the Puckwudgies, but the zombies were unimpressed. They found themselves locked in a room together. There were torches mounted along every wall. In the middle of the floor were some tall candle holders. Pam wasn't too sure the ancient Egyptians used candles, but she was no expert. The floor was awash in carpets. The furniture looked old but usable. The walls were covered in hieroglyphics and tapestries. Belle was trying to straighten out her dress. In the one-sided fight, everything had gotten turned around sideways or rearranged in a most uncomfortable way. Well, this isn't so bad. It's warm and there's food. She pointed to the bowls of fruit on the table. Pam wasn't quite so happy. Oh, yeah? Well, you're not the one about to get married, and that fruit is all canned. She pointed out the pile of empty cans under the table. Sarah decided to try to see the brighter side of things. Well, just maybe the guy you're marrying won't be too ugly, and just think, you'll now be royalty. Pam wasn't having any of it. My mom will be pissed. She told me I wasn't supposed to talk to strangers, and I'm sure she doesn't want me marrying one either. Sarah thought about those corny movies her mother watched on TV. Look at it this way. You're not marrying a prince, you're marrying a king. Mostly she was glad it wasn't her getting hitched. Pam thought about this a bit. Yeah, you got a point. Belle had a thought. Think about this. She began pacing back and forth. You go ahead with the wedding. You marry this king guy. Then, during the huge reception I'm sure they will have follow, you slip something into his wine. Once he's dead, you'll be the queen, and you can tell all these dead guys to let us go, and to turn over any treasure they have laying around, too. Belle looked quite pleased with her plan. Pam was aghast. I can't just kill someone. What kind of poison do you have? She thought some more. Oh, come on. What am I saying? I can't just kill someone. It would be wrong. Okay, how about you just knock him out for a few hours and we make a break for it? Belle pulled a green glass vial from her dress. Pam liked this plan better, all except the wedding part. Sarah had been thinking hard. She had that look on her face. That weird guy, the one who wants you to get married, he said his name was Not Good, I Be Bad, right? Didn't that beatnik Doug say something about Dr. I Be Bad? Pam remembered the conversation. Oh, yeah, he said the guy was some kind of a world authority on ancient stuff and things. Pam didn't think he was all that famous. He'd never been on Ancient Aliens. As they were deep in conversation, the door swung open. A nasty looking zombie, dressed like an Egyptian servant, missing too many parts, came stumbling in. She had one arm, which was full of white cloth. The zombie dropped the cloth on the floor near the table and then shuffled back out the door. Pam had a quick look out the door. There were a dozen heavily armed dead guys dressed in various forms of Egyptian guard uniforms standing in the hallway. The armed guards all looked uninterested in Pam and her friends, but they still looked dangerous. Sarah started poking around the pile of clothes. Oh, look, it's some kind of a fancy dress. She held it up so Pam could see. I'll bet it's your wedding gown. As Sarah held the gown up to her, as if modeling it, she tried to dance around a bit, but wound up falling over when the gown got tangled up under her feet. Belle hummed her version of the wedding march. Oh man, this is not what I had in mind when I came on this trip. Pam just wanted to go home. Try it on. Let's see how you look. Belle gave Pam a wicked grin. No way, I'm not putting that thing on. I'll just continue dressed as I am. She gave her friends her best stern look. Belle and Sarah started trying to convince Pam otherwise. The door swung open. The same parts missing zombie came staggering back in. It dropped some more cloth on the floor before staggering back out the door. Sarah lifted one of the gowns up off the floor. Oh, shoot. She had a skimpy white outfit in her hands. Bridesmaids. Let's just wait and see. Maybe we can escape before anything drastic happens. Pam had just finished when the door swung open once more. A Dr. Ibibad walked in with a half dozen huge guards. None of them were missing any parts. He looked at Sarah holding up the tiny outfit. Ah, you've got your gowns. Put them on so we can proceed with the wedding. He looked at the three girls, who all just looked back at him. Either you put them on, or I'll have my men put them on for you. Pam looked at the huge dead guys. That will look kind of strange. I don't think they'll fit. They're kind of small. The doctor got a weird look on his face. Then it dawned on him what she was trying to say. No, no, not put them on themselves. I'll have them rip your clothes off and then dress you. You won't enjoy it one bit, I'm sure. You're right, we won't enjoy it. What if I just say no? What if I refuse to marry your king? Pam was feeling a bit rebellious. Then I'll have my men kill your little friend here. The doctor pointed his finger right at Sarah. I'll tell them to make it slow and painful as well. Pam thought that would be a very bad thing. Sarah thought this sounded like an extremely bad thing. Belle wasn't very keen on the idea either. So give us a bit of privacy. Pam decided they had no choices. Once the doctor and his dead entourage were out the door, the three got busy. They got busy looking at the white gowns they would have to don. Sarah held hers up and looked in the full length mirror. I don't think this is my size. It's a bit small. Belle held her outfit at arm's length. Well, this is definitely not my color. Do you think they'll give me something in black? Pam had run out of ideas. Let's get these on before those dead guys come back and try to help. She slowly started to change. The three looked at each other. Pam had to admit they did look like a bunch of extras from a Cleopatra movie. Sarah had quickly decided that her outfit wasn't so bad. She had changed and then spent her time running around the room laughing. Pam spent as much time as she could carefully folding her own clothes and placing them in a neat, orderly manner. The gown she had put on hung down to the floor. It was snug in all the wrong places, making her feel exposed. Her sandals were a few sizes too big. Belle was just plain weird looking. Her gown was hooked over one shoulder and had only come down to her knees. She'd left her black and orange striped stockings on, as well as her hot pink running shoes. Every inch of her exposed skin was the same green shade. As they were finishing up, the zombie servant returned with a handful of black hair. The hair made a big pile next to the table, and then the zombie left again. Sarah started pulling at the pile of hair. Oh, look, wigs! I guess they want us to look as Egyptian as we can. She plopped one down on her head. How do I look? She tried to see herself in the mirror, but the bangs hung down in front of her eyes. You look like a very short, skinny Elizabeth Taylor, Belle said. You look like the Jolly Green Egyptian. Sarah stuck her tongue out and went. Belle stuck her tongue out and tried to make the same sound. They both laughed so hard they nearly fell over. Pam was glad to see they were smiling at each other finally. One, oh man, this is about the worst thing I've ever done, Pam said. The door swung open again. The three girls were being led down a long corridor. There were hundreds of guards both in front of them and following. Pam kept looking for a means of escape, but she was batting zero so far. The procession walked slowly along between hundreds of other zombies that were all waving their arms and making a horrible sound that Pam hoped was their version of cheering. Most of them were waving mesquite branches in the air. She guessed palm fronds were few and far between in West Texas. Hey, Belle, do you have any of that air freshener with you? Pam hoped she'd say yes. Belle ran her hands over her gown. Uh, I left it in my cloak. Pam thought for a second. And that magic elixir I'm supposed to use to get out of this mess? Pam whispered. You mean the poison? I guess I left that behind too. Belle got a sheepish look on her face. Pam got busy trying to come up with a plan to not get married to some king that she had never met. The guards led the three girls into a huge open space. It was lined with giant statues of Anubis and some other Egyptian gods that Pam didn't recognize. Way down at the far end was a raised platform. On it sat two great big thrones. One of them was occupied. Sara leaned in close. "Aren't they supposed to carry you in one of those fancy chair thingies?" Pam didn't have an answer for her young minion, as she was too busy worrying about the coming wedding, as she never much liked weddings, and she sure wasn't too happy about this one. The guards leading them began to split and walk to either side of a set of stairs. The stairs went up and up about 10 feet. At the top sat the king. Pam tried to put her brain into overdrive to think up her next course of action. As Pam came to the bottom of the steps, she turned and tried to follow the guards. A hand grabbed her shoulder. The fingers were tipped with nails that looked more like claws. They dug in just enough to let Pam know that she was not supposed to go to the side, but up. Pam started climbing the stairs. She felt like passing out. Maybe she could feign being sick. She realized she didn't have to pretend. She felt as if she were about to throw up, and real soon. Her knees were shaking so hard they were banging together. The top of the dais was just above her line of sight. Pam stopped climbing. She wasn't going any further until someone or something poked her in the backside. Something very sharp. Pam started towards the top once more. As her head came up above the top of the platform, Pam thought, maybe if I play dead. She looked at the man sitting to the left-hand throne. Oh, shoot. Playing dead wasn't going to work. It looked as if the king was already doing it. There he sat in all his glory. The king had a striped head covering that looked very Egyptian. Around his head was a coiled cobra. Its head was up in a striking pose. The snake looked to be made out of solid gold. The king was dressed in a traditional Egyptian garment, a white linen shindiate. It looked like a skirt. It was the only white thing Pam could see. Everything else was a dirty gray. The king was wrapped from head to toe in linen strips. The only part of him not covered were his eyes, which looked like two black pits. The king was a mummy. Wait a minute. Is he dead? Like, as in, he's a mummy? Pam had stopped in her tracks. The sharp bottom poker did it again. "Get a move on. The king is waiting for his bride," the doctor hissed. Pam could hear somebody begin to sob. She thought it was either Sara, but then it might be Belle, and for all she knew, it could be both of them. Pam took a step closer to the dead bridegroom. Oh, this is just so icky. She managed to get her feet onto the top of the dais. Her toes felt as if they were trying to grab the stone and hold her back. It wasn't working. Pam began to walk slowly towards the king. She had stopped trying to think since it only made her head hurt. Hopefully something would happen to save the day. Maybe an earthquake or a fire or something. The closer to the king she got, the worse he looked. In the movies, mummies always looked, well, like they were all there. This guy was turning to dust inside his wrapper. There was a dirty brown flaky substance trickling through some of the linen wrappings. "Well, at least he doesn't smell," Pam mumbled. She stopped right in front of the dead king. Pam had no idea what to do now. "Sit. Sit next to your king," the doctor said as he pushed Pam from behind. Pam's legs were so weak she all but fell into the throne. She landed sideways, and her face was mere inches from the dead king. Sitting on her hip was a bit painful, so Pam squirmed around until she was actually sitting facing out at the masked zombies. The doctor stood right in front of her. "And now we begin." He hefted a huge scroll and he began to read. It was all in Egyptian. Pam had no idea what was being said. She'd never bothered to learn Egyptian since she had no intention of ever needing to know it. Now she wished that maybe she had taken a rudimentary Egyptian language class or two. The doctor rambled on, waving his hands in the air now and again to emphasize something important or other. Pam looked for her friends. She finally spotted them at the bottom of the dais, all away to the right. Sara looked distressed. She was looking around as if trying to find a way to save her friend. Belle was looking dejected. Having forgotten all of her magic potions was weighing heavy on her mind. Some of the female zombies were holding tissues up to their eyes. One or two of them was holding handfuls of dead weeds. The doctor had been talking for an awful long time. He lifted a crown that looked like a golden serpent in the air, and then he slammed it down on top of Pam's head. She looked around. All the zombies were staring at her. Are we done? Pam thought getting married would be a lot more painful. Oh, that's what Paula had said. Getting married is no walk in the park. And when you get married and settle down, you'll wish you were a teen again. So Pam just figured it would have been a lot worse. Pam tried her tough guy routine. "So now what? I'm the queen, right? Do you have to do as I say?" The doctor laughed, which took away Pam's tough attitude. "Oh, we're not finished yet. First, you have to join your husband." The laugh was very disturbing. "Join him?" As in, Pam felt more sick than ever. "You must become a mummy bride." The doctor pointed to Pam, and several zombies came running, well, walking kind of fast. For them, it looked like running. They grabbed Pam and drug her away. The doctor turned to the assembled zombies. "Take those two back to the room." He pointed at Belle and Sara, just in case nobody knew who those two were. Just in case this one doesn't work out, we might have to try it again. The zombies grabbed her friends by the arms and legs, and a few zombies grabbed each other. They made a big deal about taking her friends away. Without thinking, Pam asked, "Where are you taking me?" "To the embalming room. You're not going to like this, but that's your problem, not mine." He did more of that nasty laughing that was getting on Pam's nerves. Pam was laying on a stone slab. It was cold on all of the places making contact. Her arms and her legs were being held in place by some of the biggest zombies she'd ever seen. Several zombies came into the room. They were all dressed in what looked like priest gowns. There was a lot of sparkly gold hanging from them. One who looked to be in charge aimed a bony finger at Pam, and he said, "Ur, ur, 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 ur." His tongue was rotting away like the rest of him. The other priests looked at the zombies, began wrapping Pam with long linen strips. "Hey, wait a second. I saw this movie. You can't turn me into a mummy. I still have my whole life before me." She was torn between fighting or passing out. Her fight or flight was more like fright or unconsciousness. Pam tried to resist, but found it was futile. The giant zombies would lift her up off the stone any time the priest zombies needed access to her underside. Pam found herself suspended in the air by her arms and legs. She did the only thing she could think of. She passed out. Belle and Sarah were thrown into the room that they'd been in just a few hours ago. Belle hit the floor with a thud. She was just about to try sitting up when Sarah landed on top of her. They both laid there, not sure as to what to do next. Belle finally pushed Sarah off and stood up. Hurt's hurt, but nothing was broken. They took our clothes. All of my potions are gone. Sarah just gave her a sad look. If you hadn't forgotten them, then Pam would still be single and not married to some dead guy. Belle felt just a bit guilty as charged. Look, it's not too late. All we have to do is figure out a way to escape from this room, overpower a few dozen zombies, find Pam, sneak out of this underground tomb, and get back to civilization while not freezing to death. Belle held up a finger to signify each of the tasks at hand. She counted the fingers she held up. Just 5 things, that's all. Sarah felt a bit better, knowing there were only 5 ridiculously difficult things they needed to do. How do we start? I don't know about you, but I'm starved. Belle grabbed a bowl of canned fruit. Sarah wanted to go save her best friend, but she found her stomach complaining about her mistreatment of it. We'll save Pam right after we eat then. Belle just gave her a thumbs up since her mouth was full. Sarah pounded on the door. Then she screamed, I'm dying! Somebody do something! When Belle had come up with this plan, Sarah said nobody was that stupid. Belle pointed out the zombies were not known for their thinking abilities. After all, they ate brains, not used them. The door swung open and a few zombies looked in. Sarah made a great deal about stumbling about with one hand up to her forehead. Oh, the pain! What she lacked in acting ability, she made up for in her frenetic movements. The zombies all looked at Sarah and then at each other. Sarah chose that moment to throw herself to the floor while trying not to hurt herself. Everything is growing dark. She flopped onto the floor. It's getting cold. She tried to lay as still as she could. The zombies slowly moved to the body on the floor. They had no concerns for Sarah, but they had been told to keep her in the room and not let her escape. It would seem dying just might be a form of escape. They moved closer to the young girl. Belle swung the tall candle holder with all of her might. She'd been doing some practice swings in the corner. Having been a softball champion, she knew how to swing a bat. The end of the candle holder made contact with the first zombie's head. The first zombie hadn't been all that fresh to begin with. The candlestick holder passed through the place its head had been occupying as if hitting a water balloon. The head exploded, sending zombie brains in all directions. The momentum from the swing caused Belle to spin around in a tight circle. The next zombie in line met with the same outcome. The third tried to duck, but only got half of its head out of the way. The top 50% went flying along with all of its brains. Belle continued to rotate a few more times. She had to stop spinning. Her head continued for a few more rotations. The room was now spinning as she tried to focus. She sunk to the floor. The remaining zombies all tried to rush her at once. They converged on the witch, who was trying to get back to her feet. Belle tried to use the candlestick holder as a crutch. It swung to the side just as several zombies came at her. The first zombie found the candle holder suddenly sticking out of his chest. The zombie behind him kept pushing forward and wound up joining the first, who was impaled on the long stand. Belle hung on to the candle holder as she was pulled to her feet as the two zombies tried to move back. 3 zombies had tried to jump on the witch from all sides just as she was pulled away. It wound up in a heap on the floor. Sarah grabbed a huge bowl of fruit and began slamming it down on anything that looked like a zombie head. She'd seen enough zombie movies to know you had to separate the brains from the body in order to kill the undead. The bowl went up and down, and the brains went all around. Belle finally managed to get to her feet. The room was still spinning, but not too fast. Her head felt like it was going to fall off. She looked over at Sarah. "You look like you just fought your way out of a meatpacking plant." Sarah looked down at her formerly white gown. It was awash in brown, mostly coagulated zombie fluids. "Oh, man, this smells horrible." She considered removing her dress. Belle discovered she was in the same shape. All that clobbering of zombie heads had splashed nasty goo all over her. Yuck! This stuff is sticky and slimy at the same time. As they were standing there looking at each other, the door flew open and the room filled with more zombies. The zombie guards all began poking around, looking under the furniture, and even lifting the rugs. Belle and Sarah just froze, unsure of how to react. The zombies made some weird noises and then left. In the hallway, half went one direction and the other, well, they went the other. Sarah whispered to Belle, "What just happened?" Belle looked at herself in the mirror. The image looking back at her looked like an Egyptian zombie. The green skin helped a lot. "They think we're dead." Sarah was trying to remove the layer of goo from her body. "Leave it. The zombies will think we're with them." Belle scooped up a handful of zombie mess from the floor and reapplied it to Sarah's face. "Oh, man, this is absolutely the worst. I think I'm going to puke." Sarah went to hold her hand in front of her mouth, only to find that it was covered with zombie brains. Pam awoke from the strangest dream. She was playing the part of Zita Johann in an old Universal Studios film. Boris Karloff was being played by Dr. Ibibad. The not so good doctor was trying to turn her into a mummy. Pam tried to sit up. She was encased in linen wrappings from head to foot. She wasn't sure if her eyes were covered or not because it was pitch black. She tried wiggling around, which worked out fine until she found the edge of the stone table that she was laying on. She flipped over the side and landed in a heap. "Ouch, that hurts." Pam found it necessary to state the obvious. Feeling pain from falling to the floor worked to inform her she wasn't dead. Then she got to thinking. Would she feel pain? Never having been dead before, she wasn't too sure how it should feel. Pam thought back to how Sharma and Dan could feel cold. They would get hungry. They ate food and they drank beer and wine. They acted just like regular people, only they were both dead. "Am I dead?" she asked anyone who might be lurking in the darkness around her. There was no answer. Pam managed to get to her feet. She stood up and tried to feel her face. The bandaging that was wrapped around her fingers made feeling her face useless, and her face was wrapped as well. Pam tried to pull the wrappings off of her hands. This was just not working out. Pam put her finger up to where her eye should be. Ow! She'd poked herself in the eye. "Okay, I know my eyes aren't covered, so it must just be dark in here." She took a step across the room, her hands feeling in the darkness in front of her. She tried to move ahead slowly so she wouldn't hit her toe or her nose. After a few dozen tiny steps, her hand hit something hard and cold. It felt like stone. Now to find the door. Pam started moving along the wall, feeling for an opening. After what felt like an eternity, Pam came to a corner. She continued feeling along the second wall. She tried to keep her spirits up by convincing herself she couldn't be dead. She had moved along the wall only to find another corner. There has to be a door here somewhere. They brought me in here through one. Maybe they bricked the door shut. Pam stopped moving. Was that me who said that? She hadn't heard from the voices in her head since the trip to Northeast Texas. Her hands were shaking from fear, and she tried to move away from the second corner. Something warm and wet rolled down her cheek. Gotta be sweat. Pam shivered from the cold. Or maybe I just got something in my eye. She continued feeling along the wall. The third corner came and went. Pam felt like giving up. She was cold and hungry. Her eyes hurt from trying to see in the dark. She wasn't even getting out of this tomb. Great, I'll die in here, and then I'll just become a mummied bride. Having passed the fourth corner, Pam gave in to her fears. She slumped to the floor, intent on dying as quickly and painlessly as she could. She leaned back against the wall and fell onto her back. She'd finally found the door. I didn't really give up. I was just resting. Pam got to her feet. She tried to look to her right, but the blackness was unbroken. She turned around. Is that a light, or am I seeing things? Pam was beginning to worry about talking to herself, but she had nobody else around to ask. In the distance was a very dim flicker of light. Pam took a few steps towards it. With each passing few steps, the light got a little brighter. Soon she could see the stones of the walls. She wanted to run towards the light, but managed to hold back. There might be something standing just around the next corner. Once Pam could see where she was going, she slowed down and began looking for zombies or monsters or even a ghost. At least if she ran into a ghost, she could ask them what was going on. The hallway came to an end. The light was coming from around the corner. Pam got as close to the wall as she could. Carefully, she edged forwards. She had her back to the wall, so she held her hand out to the side and ran her fingers along so she would know when she was about to the opening. Pam's fingers found the edge of the wall. She turned her head and moved it along the stone until she could see around the corner. The light was coming from a huge metal bowl filled with flammable oil. The flickering cast weird shadows in every direction. There was a guard standing next to the fire. The guard wasn't all that big. Pam got a better look at him. He looked to be about maybe 6 feet tall, but he was also very thin. He was dressed like an Egyptian guard from a movie, and he was missing part of his head. He kept twirling his sword like it was a baton. Pam eased back around the corner. Oh, there you are. I've been waiting to speak to you. Pam froze. Was this meant for her or someone else? Pam slowly slid her head back around to look at the zombie. The zombie guard was smiling at her. Uh, you wanted to speak to me? Pam knew she could outrun this dead guy, but still she didn't want to be distracted while his bodyguards snuck up on her from behind. The zombie guard set his sword down next to the fire and moved over to the opposite wall. He felt the top of his head and scratched at the hole there. I seem to be missing something up here. Oh well, I can always cover it with my hat, if I can ever find it. He spoke with a southern drawl. Pam found the idea of an Egyptian zombie guard with a southern accent just too weird. She stepped out from around the corner. So, what was it you wanted to talk about? The zombie looked different from all of the other undead guys. Pam suddenly realized he could speak, and he acted more like a living person that was dead and not some reanimated dead guy. This was a ghost of a zombie. Now, how bizarre was that? The zombie did some more of that smiling. Allow me to introduce myself, Captain Chapman of the Texas 42nd Cavalry Unit. Or at least I was until we lost the war and I headed west to look for fame and fortune. When you showed up, we all thought, great, now that crazy doctor will get his wish. Then we found out that you were that weird chick who could see ghosts. Uh, like us. He looked a bit embarrassed after calling her weird. When that crazy witch hit me in the head with a candlestick holder, my spirit was released from my body and I came looking for you. Pam relaxed a bit, knowing she was only dealing with a ghost. So, what's going on around here? What is up with the mummy and what is Dr. Ibybad trying to do? It all started when those kids from the city showed up and started digging around the old Indian village. We tried to scare them off, but the professor in charge convinced them that we weren't real. He smiled as he thought back on his best haunting antics. Then they uncovered that secret underground room where the locals had buried a real, mean, nasty, horrible creature. The ghost gave a visible shudder at the thought of it. Pam was confused. I'm confused. Why would the Indians wrap some guy up like a mummy and bury him? This is not the kind of thing Indians did, I think. Pam was a bit behind Sara when it came to history. If it wasn't on Ancient Aliens, she hadn't seen it. The ghost tried to fill in all the blanks. No, see, way back in the old times, before this was a country, this bunch of strangers showed up and they forced the locals to build a huge pyramid and a tomb. You've seen it. The pyramid. It's under that pile of tailings from the mine, and we're in the tomb. Pam had thought that pile of dirt looked like a pyramid, but she figured that was impossible. The Indians said once the pyramid was finished, these weirdos brought a dead guy wrapped up from head to foot and tried to get them to worship it. The strangers wanted the chief's daughter to marry the thing. Well, turns out the dead guy wasn't totally dead. He came to life and started destroying everything. There was a great war that lasted for 20 years. The Indians banded together and they managed to defeat this no longer dead man, and the strangers buried him under one of the houses. The Indians believe there was a curse on the entire village and they packed up and moved away. How did they defeat the mummy? Pam was just assumed this was who the dead man was. We don't know. It was so long ago the full story has been lost to time. The folks up north at that fancy casino are the only descendants, and they only know about half of the story. Pam asked, so now what? Is there something I'm missing here? The ghost looked uneasy. Well, now that that guy Ibybad is about to bring the dead man back to life, it looks like that war is going to pick up right where it left off. Pam was relieved. Oh, no, see, the dead guy's really dead now. I saw him. He's way past his prime. That crazy doctor is going to bring him back to life. All that is needed is a huge jolt of electricity to zap him into life and a full moon. Last time they used lightning. Ah, thank God we're miles from the nearest. Oh, shoot. Pam remembered the generator used to power the campers. That, and it was almost a full moon. Why a full moon? She asked. You're asking me? I'm just an old prospector. I only dress like this 'cause the doctor insisted. He wants everybody to look the part, as he says. The captain thought a bit. We, that is, the dead folks from all around these parts, have been forced to follow some unknown force. We can't refuse. It's kind of like the call of nature, too powerful to resist. He smiled at Pam. Now that my body is back to being dead, or deader, more dead than it was, I am free to move about on my own, but without any physical form. Do you have any idea how I can defeat the mummy? Pam was saying a quiet prayer. I have no idea. Maybe you could destroy the power source or shoot him in the head with a slingshot or something. Pam nearly jumped for joy. How do I go about getting out of this place? Now, is this a horrible place to break for the week? Unfortunately, I am going to have to take a break. It's been an hour. I hope you're enjoying the show so far. Don't fail to listen to the next exciting episode, which will hopefully be coming out in a week. Until next time, this is Chris James for Story Time.